My name is Gair Gebethy. I have the pleasure of being the Organisational Development Manager at the Adelaide Convention Centre. Perhaps I'll just give you a brief bio as to how I've been able to stand in front of you. About 15 years ago, Fleur and I were involved with the Olympics. She was one of 500 staff and students that came over to Sydney, and I was at TAFE at the time helping sort of coordinate that with an HR company, and we had a terrific back 6 weeks there, if I remember rightly. And but from my own background, my background is hotels, although I've been a lecturer and a trainee, a trainer in a variety of TAFE systems around Australia. And my introduction to hotels here in South Australia was what was the St Leonard's Inn, which is now the Watermark. So I don't know if any of you know of that particular place down the end of Anzac Highway. Back in the day, it was a very popular place for bikies, and then it got a little bit of a makeover and became the Watermark after a whole lot of other bits and pieces. So, but in the UK, I was working in hotels, and I worked in Europe as well. My present role as Organisational Development Manager at the Convention Centre has me looking after the training and development for 400 plus staff, and I'll talk about the stats in a second. So really hotels, hospitality, events is very much what I'm doing. Today I'm going to be talking to you on the unit that you're looking at today, recruit, interview and induct staff. So I'll give you our perspective, but I'd like to sort of hear what systems and procedures you have in your respective places. And just so that, I'm sorry I won't probably remember all your names, but if you could just tell me who you are, what your role is and where you are, if I could just go around the room, starting with you. Sorry.
My name's Blaine, I'm Assistant Manager at Nick O'Shea's Irish Pub down south.
And
Hackham.
that's whereabouts, is that?
Hackham.
Hackham, okay. How long have you been there?
That one now I've been just over a year now, but I've been with the company 4 years.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Junior Manager at Colonist Tavern in Norwood.
At which one?
Colonist.
Oh, right. Yeah. And is that a typical pub, or does it have a particular theme to it?
No, it's just a typical pub, I suppose.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I'm Nick, I work at the Duck Inn in Corona Valley, and I'm the game manager there.
Okay, right, thank you. Hi.
I'm Dave, I'm the venue manager at the Unley.
Right, so that's just looks at all of the entertainment that you do there, and or the yeah, okay. Oh, good, thank you.
Adrian, sous chef at the Festival Theatre.
Oh, wow, yeah, different, thank you.
Neighbours. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Hi.
Brad, I'm the manager at Avenues.
Okay, that's where, Brad?
Down at Stepney.
Stepney, okay. And you're, sorry, what role there?
Manager.
Managing there, okay, good. And hi.
I'm the assistant manager, Benjamin on Franklin.
Benjamin and Franklin. Okay. Again, it's our perspective at the conventions that I'll be sort of giving to you. So please, if you'd like to sort of either question or just ask for further explanations as I go along, please don't hesitate to ask, and I'll do my best to do that. So just to give you a bit of an idea of the size and what we do with regards to recruitment. So we've got at present 402 employees, just a little few more males than females. Out of that 402, we've got quite a program where we get a lot of Indigenous staff working with us, which we're very pleased about from a profile. 58% of our employees are born overseas, and that represents 42 different nationalities. Out of that 402, around about 120 are either full-time or permanent part-time. So there's a big, as you can see, big casualised workforce that makes up the convention centre there. Now, this is perhaps a bit of a confusing slide, but I'll do my best to try to give you an idea. That particular graphic there represents 21 different departments. The green segment at the top are the 4 departments: event planning, marketing and sales, exhibitions and technical design, which capture the business. So this is trying to give you the scale of the place. The orange section are the operational departments that are very much part of the preparatory work for an event. Uniforms, we provide all the uniforms for our staff, a setup crew that make the rooms look good. House services are our logistics people, move everything around. A kitchen, perhaps one of the largest commercial kitchens in Adelaide. Technical production that does all the sound and lighting, and procurement does all the purchasing, everything that we consume. We have 2 car parks that we control. Our banqueting is called Event Floor Services, Customer Relations and Security. Security is all in-house, as are all our services. We have a corporate bistro, Regattas, and then we have a cleaning department, Human Resources, that's where I belong. Building engineering to keep the maintenance going, stewarding, wash-up, IT and finance. So all those departments obviously require staffing over various times. So let's just start with recruitment. And one of the areas that I think talks about in your studies and then assessments is how do you determine what it is that you need? And again, I look at it from our point of view. The convention centre was built and is owned by the state government. We are what's called a commercial government enterprise. And our mission, so to speak, is to contribute to South Australia's economic, intellectual and cultural wealth by hosting business events on a commercial basis. That primarily means that to be viable, we've got to bring in business which is either national or international. That's where the big money is. Just on that, from a statistics point of view, for every dollar that somebody spends coming to the Adelaide Convention Centre, we get about 10 cents or 10%. The other 90 cents goes into the community. So, for example, if we've got a large conference, we've got one in at the moment called Steadfast, that's taking over just about every square metre of the building. That's worth around about $200,000 to $300,000 of business for us. But that equates to around about $2 to $3 million worth of business for Adelaide. The biggest winners are the hotels. They get up to 40 cents in the dollar. Shopping, restaurants, and then there's what's called convention tourism on top of that, people that go on to the Barossa and Flinders and places like that. So when we're looking at what we need from a strategic point of view, it has to be aligned with where we want to take our business and people who have an understanding of that. We have 5 divisions where those 21 departments belong, and each division has an executive manager, and it's their responsibility to look after the needs of what it is that their roles are there to perform. For example, in the operations side of things, that looks after not only the front of house service, but looks after all of the kitchens. It looks after what we call the floor ambassadors, customer relations, cleaning, and those sorts of areas. So that's from a division needs. And then departmental needs is dictated by turnover and business needs. So we have to look at, well, and for example, with the a new building that we opened up just recently, we changed the format of some of the departments, and so we created new roles within those. We created this department called Floor Ambassadors out of Customer Relations, so we had a change and a need to get some new stuff for that. And we also changed the way that we were doing business in our Regattas Bistro as well. So that allowed us to do some recruitment. Now, with a position description, we need to have information. Now, if I can get this one happening. Okay, here we go. Each job that is performed at the Adelaide Convention Centre has a position description. This one is for event planning coordinator for small and short lead events, so for one of the more junior roles in the department. But what I wanted to do is just sort of show you this, and then I'll come back to this every now and then and describe what it's all about. Just hang on for a second. Okay. Now, with the position description, at the beginning it will talk about an organisation, and this is how we found it works well for us. So it describes what the organisation and what our corporate goals are, and that's our 5 major objectives. The big part of a job description is really what is the purpose of the role? Why are you having that particular role? This particular one says successful planning of a small or short lead events through professional liaison with clients, suppliers and other members of the ACC team. Maximise yield through efficient planning and targeted upselling. Contribute to the ongoing enhancement of the centre's product by gathering, evaluating and disseminating constructive client feedback and providing administrative support for the event planning services department. So that's really what the purpose of the role is all about. Relationships. Well, the relationship in a position description says, right, who do they answer to? Who's in charge of their department? Do they liaise with the general public or other departments? So that would be built in there. One of the major things that should be in a position description are 2 very important areas there, key result areas, KRAs, and KPIs, which are what I call key performance indicators. Just from a show of hands, have any of you actually worked with KPIs as in objectives and measures? So you've got a bit of an idea of what we're talking about here. So all of these then are used as a guide, as it were, for what the individual needs to perform. And the measures there are, well, how do we know that that person's actually achieved that? So that's in that one there. And then we also have core competencies in there which apply to the role. Is there any leadership involved in the particular role? What does that role play with regards to team orientation, communication, and so on? And strategic business, where does it fit within the business, and any specific competencies? It might be, if it's a more operational role, they might actually have to have things like forklift license or elevated work platform or something like that. Okay, so when we know that we need to have a position, we need to go to advertising, and we very seldom go to the print media at all. Do any of you use the newspapers at all for advertising? What sort of media do you use? Do internet? Does it Seek? Something like that? Yeah, so it's very much the same with us. And we actually have our own dedicated website, and it's adelaidecjobs.com.au. So anybody who is interested can put up an unsolicited application, or if we are looking for a specific set of skills, then we go to our website as well as to Seek. Now, let's just see if it will work. So this just shows you a typical advert as it will appear on our website. So this is for a role for assistant event managers. That's how our sort of page comes up. And this writing here is for those people who are coming into the website just from a random point of view and wanting to make an application. But that is very much how it looks from the website point of view. Go back. Okay. For full-time jobs, particularly highly skilled roles, we use LinkedIn. Do any of you belong to LinkedIn, just from a resource point of view? And our HR director particularly will go in and with the level of involvement he has with LinkedIn, he'll actually do a search for people with profiles on LinkedIn to actually tap into their profiles and send out just a note to them just to see if they're interested, because we've advertised a particular role, and that gets that connection happening in that regard. That's LinkedIn.
Do you have success on LinkedIn finding?
We have actually. Our last two of our last positions, full-time positions, were sourced via that as well. They still then come in and apply via the Seek and website, but it was just sending out that sort of information, as it were. So that is becoming more and more popular. Now, when you're writing a job advert, regardless of what sort of media you need to do, you need to have a grab. That is usually something that's organisation information and relating to the culture, what it is that you're trying to get the people involved with. So, on our advert, going back to that one there, the Adelaide Convention Centre currently in the second stage of an exhilarating $392 expansion. So obviously what we're trying to do is sell the idea that someone is coming to a modern, a progressive style of organisation, and it's quite important to try to get the attention of that individual. But it needs to be clear as to what the role is all about. So I'll just come back out of that. Obviously a general description of the role, what is the role all about, includes specific but a brief criteria for the role, because not only do you want to not overload the advert, but you should be putting up a copy of the position description anyway, so that people know exactly what role it is that they're actually applying for. And for this one, it was an events coordinator. That was the example that I've been giving you there. So that one works there. These are the couple of jobs that I found on the internet which I don't think should be the typical advert. Surgeon wanted for a new health clinic, experience in the area, no experience needed, must have own tools, which I thought was strange. And this one for hospitality, wanted part-time salesperson who won't quit after 2 months, who works hard and doesn't think she's doing me a favor by working here, who can take a joke and won't cry every day on the floor. So I think we've gone beyond that. Although I'm sure you've all got your own recruitment stories with regards to how people go out and advertise for their staff. Many years ago, I worked at a hotel in the UK, and for their banqueting staff, admittedly because of, I guess, my vintage, we're talking about the late 60s, early 70s, the banqueting staff would move from one big hotel to another en masse, and they would be wearing their own uniforms. If it was an evening function, it was a dinner suit, or it was a morning suit during the day, and they'd come up to the back entrance of the staff for the hotel, and the banquet manager would stand at the top of the steps and say, right, I'll take you, 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 and you, rest go away. And that was Recruitment 101 back in the day. So fortunately, we have moved on from that. But you still need to, because when people are reading that information about you, this is your statement of intent. This is your sort of sell to the individual. And if you can't back up that sell with something professional, then it's not going to go well for you. So, you've put the advert up, you've given the information, you've put it up for a reasonable length of time. Now you've got to start the selection process, and this is where perhaps some organizations don't do things successfully. So what do we need to think about? Well, to give you an idea, we recently recruited for these floor ambassadors, if you like, the reception style positions, and it was 4 casual positions that we were looking to fill. We put the job up only for 6 days and got over 220 applications just for those 4 positions. So whether we wrote it well or there's just a lot of interest in that particular style of role, we don't know. So if you put the advert out there, you get all these responses. As an employer, as a reasonably professional organization, you've got to do something with those. You can't just leave them hanging. So let's just sort of go through the sorts of things you need to think about. So use the applicant's compliance with the directives from the advert to prepare the shortlist. At the beginning of the year, we recruited for some event trainees, and we asked them to add a resume and a covering letter to the criteria that's in there. 50% of the 260 applicants that we got for the traineeship didn't bother to attach a letter, so that was 130 applications that we immediately put a line through. They just didn't read the application, they didn't submit a letter. Now the resumes might have been good, we might have missed out on some good people, but those are the big things that really need to, or the small things that can trip you up. So that helps you create a shortlist. Have they done what you asked them to do? Have they provided answers to the criteria you've talked about? All successful applicants should be communicated with. That's the beauty of modern technology. With our website, we can get those applications, we can actually respond to them in a personalized email and let them know whether they made it to the next stage or no, you weren't successful at this time, thank you very much. And so we don't keep them waiting around, and that's very important to let the unsuccessful people know. And the shortlisted applicants should meet the criteria of the position, because you want to do justice to yourself. You want the best, well, what you hope will be the best people for the positions that you're advertising. And you contact the shortlisted applicants for an interview. Again, our website allows us to not only contact them, but reconfirm the booking, where the location of the interview will be, and so on. So that works very well with us. From shortlisting, then you go on to panel interviews. Panel interviews are mostly for the roles that are either full or permanent part-time, or perhaps require maybe a little bit more one-on-one style of the interview process. We also do group interviews for our operational positions, we've got something called centralised rostering, where people actually come in and they become trained in 4 or 5 different operation departments. That one day they could be helping plate up in the kitchen, next day they could be setting the halls or serving it. So that really not only maximises their training capabilities, but it gives them a great spread of hours for the hours that they're available for. But primarily we're looking at panel interviews for this particular part of the conversation. Okay, so when our processes, usually it's the department manager and a representative from human resources, and there should always be a minimum of 2 panelists. Do you or have you all been involved in panel interviews at this stage? Yeah. Do any of you do group interviews at all? Yeah?
Our floor staff.
The floor staff. So that's at the festival.
Yeah.
There. Is that where they get a group in and they do a variety of exercises with them,
Yeah,
just
they
to sort
come
of?
in and they do a variety of exercises, and they do some worksheets like manual calculations and all that.
Ah,
sort of
yes.
stuff as well,
Okay.
Setting tables and just making sure they can actually carry more than one plate.
One plate, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is good, thank you.
Yeah.
But for those that do the panel interviews, how many people are, just by example, sorry, what was your name?
Oh, Dave.
Dave, sorry.
I
How
used to
many?
work in recruitment, so it's been my former life, I guess. I used to be in recruitment for 3 years.
Oh, right, so,
They would have been for call centre staff, there was panel ones, and then in IT there was some things as well, so across the board. Really.
yeah, okay. We should have got RPL for this.
No, it's all yours.
Okay. Yeah, so obviously you want a balanced approach in there, and certainly from our point of view, we like to see that sometimes it might be a senior staff member that would accompany the department manager, around about 3. Anything more than that and it becomes a bit too daunting for that. Although having said that, when we just recently have recruited for the first time in the centre's existence a new executive chef. The executive chefs that we've had have sort of grown up with the convention centre, so we actually went out and the chief executive got involved, as well as the director of operations, as well as the director of human resources. So that was quite a high profile panel that we created for that
Have they
particular.
appointed someone now?
Sorry?
Have they appointed
Yes, he's somebody who was coming over from the Hunter Valley Convention Centre. He's originally from Scotland, but got quite a broad experience across the board and starts next month.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes, particularly in more formal, sometimes within government, you might have a chairperson, or depending on, as I say, the importance of the position, you might have someone who takes a controlling role to determine what it is that you're getting out of the criteria and to maintain conformity, because you really want to have procedures that can stand up to transparency and an auditing point of view, because you want to treat everybody fairly. And also from a statistics and a data point of view, there's an obligation on employers to keep records of people that have been interviewed over time as well. That's just one of those things that you need to think about. We utilise a template which has a set amount of questions. Each question is weighted, given points, and allows us to obviously ask each candidate the same questions. We can sometimes elaborate on those, but if you start dancing about and just asking random questions, A, they might not be appropriate, or B, you're not necessarily going to get the same information from all of your applicants in there. And mostly they're what are called behavioural. They are those that elicit some sort of response as to how they performed over a particular period. In the modern workplace, there's a variety of questions that you need to avoid. With those that are delving into the individual's personal background, that isn't appropriate there. Their relationship status, you know, are you living with somebody? Are you gay? Are you married? What are you going to do with your kids? Do you have you taken much sick leave? Even though you're wanting to find the right person for the job, certain things aren't, you just aren't able to ask at this stage, but there are ways of getting around that. So if somebody you felt wasn't perhaps of a physical stature for a particular role, you might say, right, this particular role requires the moving of tables and chairs and heavy equipment and lifting up loads in excess of 30 to 35 kilos. What sort of role have you done where similar tasks were performed? And if they say, oh, no, I'm not able to do that sort of thing, then of course there's ways around. You have to be careful in the wording that you use. But more often what you're looking for are these sorts of good behavioural questions. For example, give me an example of a time that you felt you went above and beyond the call of duty at work. So obviously you're looking for somebody who can give you some examples. Hospitality, as you know, is an amazing business. And those people that really thrive on the pressures of work, dealing with the public, dealing with their fellow staff members, who get that joy out of coming to work. You're looking for those sorts of people that will go that extra mile. And we say quite regularly, particularly in our group interviews, if you're just here purely to go through the paces, then you're not the sort of person that we want. But you don't necessarily say it in those straight up terms. Another question might be, have you ever been on a team where someone was not pulling their own weight? How did you handle it? Obviously, from this sort of question, we're looking for how do they get on with people? Do they ever find themselves in conflict situations? How do they deal with issues, particularly to do with performance? So that's an area that is a good question. And describe how you would handle a situation if you were required to finish multiple tasks by the end of the day and there was no conceivable way that you could finish them. So again, you're asking them to relate to their experiences, and it really depends on what level of skill that you're looking for. So that probably hopefully makes some sense there. So you've interviewed all the people. You now need to you make a selection, and as I say, if you use the questions and the weighting scenario, quite often your, dare I say it, gut instinct says, well, this is the person that we really feel could work with us. And so you would obviously still use your marking scenario to perhaps validate the decisions that you've been making. An important part, if the person was unsuccessful at interview, they should be communicated with. We always say, we will be in contact with you by such and such a time. Depending again, how many people that we're interviewing for, as a guide, usually for say a full-time position, depending on against the seniority of it, probably be about half a dozen to maybe 10 maximum people we interview. When we're looking at our trainees who are full-time and we're looking for about 4 or 5, then we interview somewhere between 20 and 30, depending on again on the number of people. So that means there's a lot of people that don't get through, and so we let them know that they haven't been successful. And again, we've got our a website that allows us to do that. That's an important part. Now, again, depending on your own internal procedures, after your successful interview, and what you need to let the people know at the interview is that what are the next stages in the recruitment process, because it's not just the interview in the modern day and age. At the convention centre, practically every role that we have now of an operational base has to have a pre-employment medical, which is at the convention centre's expense. And kind of like that question that you can't ask about, is this person got the physical capacity to do the job? What you're doing is making sure that they don't have any pre-existing conditions which will get in the way of doing it. And that's how you word it. You don't say, oh look, you don't look fit enough. You let a professional, and then for each of these operational roles we have what's called a job dictionary, and so their physical capabilities are mapped against tasks like lifting weights, pushing trolleys and other physical standing, polishing cutlery, whatever it might be. So that's one of the processes. Additionally, some of the roles also require a police check, particularly security. They have a police check there. All of our trainees and apprentices and some of our senior executive positions and our certainly our security have psychometric testing. Do any of you have any of that at all? So it's really, it's like an aptitude test, but it's really designed along the lines of us trying to validate what the person said with regards to things like working in a team, how do they get on in conflict situations, how motivated are they to succeed in their job and things like that. And there's a whole range of questions which are asked by a psychologist, and sometimes they don't make it, and if they don't, then that's communicated with them as well. And mandatory for all successful interview candidates is reference checking. in this day and age, reference checking is very, very important because people can falsify documentations, they can falsify their resumes, letters of recommendation. In fact, there was an article I was reading the other day in Canberra, the taxation office, an employee was prosecuted for fraud and deception because they submitted a resume and false letters of recommendation for a particular role that they had with the Australian Taxation Office, and they were fined quite severely as a result. So there's a lot of websites out there. I know that the Advertiser did a scan a while back, and they found over 1,000 websites that were selling qualifications, supposedly genuine qualifications. So you need to, but primarily we look for professional references, and we get people say, oh look, my brother-in-law will vouch for me, or whoever else. In this day and age, you've got to have somebody that can validate what it is that person can do in the workplace. So all of those things do happen in a post. It obviously adds to the time that we're doing it, but we find that it is a process that pays dividends for us. And certainly also eligibility to work, visa, residential status, because it's an employer's responsibility to make sure that an employee has the working rights. So if they're a student, they can only do X amount of hours in a week. I think it's 20 hours for a full-time student. They can increase that over the holidays, but you have to be very careful as to what rights somebody has to work. And by saying, look, we didn't know or we didn't check is unfortunately not an argument in this day and age. So there you've done all of this work in getting the people that you think are the right people to start. And an induction, and a comprehensive induction, is very important. Actually, when I go back today, we've got a new financial accountant starting, and I'll be doing the induction with that person this afternoon. So it's going to be a one-on-one, and what I'm going to be talking about now is going to be very much what's going to be the content of that induction session this afternoon. So, critical to induct new staff effectively. I would like to think that our recruitment processes do set somebody up to come to the Adelaide Convention Centre, and it should be hopefully the same with you, that you are selling the reality. Now, if you are like perhaps a used car salesperson, and apologies if any of you have got relatives in that industry, you sometimes you're sold a lemon. On the outside it looks good, but when you come to look on the insides of it, it just doesn't match up to what was the promise. And so really you've got to be, in your induction, supporting everything that was being said at the interview and all of the descriptors you've had to bring that person into your environment and to get them to stay. So very important to be effective in your induction. And our inductions, no matter if it's a group induction, sometimes we're doing up to 15, perhaps 2 or 3 days in a row because we've done a large group, or it could be a single induction. We still want the same philosophy, we want the same information provided to those individuals. And initially our induction is very much about getting them on board to the organisation. Now, in a smaller enterprise such as the ones that you're with, you might be getting them in more quickly, but the information, one way, shape or form, should still be there. So our program includes an overview of the organisation, including our values, mission, vision, strategic objectives, and so on. Our vision for our staff is the Adelaide Convention Centre's partners in delivering winning events. So that's the way that we view ourselves, because we can't do our job by ourselves. So we're working with all of these wonderful businesses to do something. So we build on that. We talk to them about the program that we have for rewarding our staff. We've got something called Acclaim, and this allows us to get people to be recognised for over and above performance. We also have a long service program, and in fact just last Thursday we had a ceremony. We welcomed 16 people into our Hall of Fame who had been there either 10, 15, 20 or 25 years. They joined 72 existing staff who have been at the convention centre 10, 15, 20 or 25 years. And if one lady stays until May of next year, she will be our first 30-year person who's been at the convention centre. So that's part of what we call our recognition program. And we like to tell people up front that, you know, if you go over and above, you definitely will be rewarded here at the centre. So you really want to let them know where the convention centre has come from, what it's all about. And you should be doing that for your business. Obviously, there's a variety of form filling. We have the ability to have our staff go online to check their pays, and so all their pays goes into their bank automatically. They can go online, and we're just developing a process where they can actually bid for shifts as well. So we're trying to really make the connectivity work for us, but there's some necessary form filling, obviously, which goes with any job. And then the critical elements of personal presentation, depending on what role it is that they're for. For example, we're a corporate organisation, and as such, if people have got visible piercings, they need to remove those other than earrings. If they've got tattoos, visible tattoos, they need to have those covered up. Again, that's just the corporate field. So we would obviously reconfirm those sorts of things that had been talked about at interview as well. Obviously, whatever are appropriate with regards to company policies and procedures. We are working towards trying to get a lot of this compliance stuff online actually, so people can actually do this in their own time rather than have someone stand in front of them and talk about it. So we're trying to shape this, but there are some things that people do need to be aware of. Codes of conduct, for example, codes of behaviour. You know, what is acceptable in your environment, and every business would have something like that. Obviously, relevant WHS protocols. Do you all have a health and safety representative in your environments?
Yep.
Yes, I mentioned the festival theatre, but every business should have somebody who's deemed to be a work health and safety rep, so that if you, and again, depending on how work cover, which is just being changed over now to Fleur, are you across that? What work cover is now being changed to something else as of July 1st.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's no longer called work cover. I think it's something like return to work system or something like that.
Coming up this July.
Yeah, this July. Yeah, so I'm not really sure what it is. Be interesting to see that. We have a WHS strategic advisor who lets us know what's going on there. But I mean, you know, what if somebody gets injured? What you should have protocols as to what. You know, there should be at least somebody who has first aid training. Presumably you would do things like evacuation training. All of those things would need to be part of your induction. What do you do if you have to evacuate the building in an emergency? Who do you go to? Who are the people that are the wardens and so on? So that's a big part of providing that information for our team. Description of staff amenities. We feel that the things that we provide are quite attractive for our staff. All the uniforms are provided free of charge, and of course, and laundered. We have a staff canteen where people can eat during their break, and salad, sandwich making facilities, hot soup, tea, coffee, soft drinks. It's all provided free of charge. So they've got a nice canteen to go on their break, and all of those things are identified. We have subsidised parking in our car park and things like that. And of course, because our organisation is quite large, yours probably wouldn't take so much of a tour, is to get familiar with the building, because everything that you talk about usually relates to the bricks and mortar of the place. And so a good all-around introduction, and at the same time as you're going around, introducing the individuals to the key personnel, obviously. And because we do this as a generic induction, we leave it to the department managers then to do the more informal welcome to the various departments that the individuals have within their whichever role they've got. And the first training record that we provide for these is verification that they've actually undertaken the induction session. So that becomes, and we've got a computerized human resource system. So every form of training that they do goes into their history, and again they can go online at any stage and just make sure that. And we upload copies of certificates. So if someone has got certificate in first aid or is a health and safety rep, all of that information is up there and is accessible for them. So all of those systems somewhere should be there. Now, it's on occasions like this that we just put up, I guess, by way of letting you know what the ACC is all about, and whether you have programs. Because at every interview that we have, be it a panel interview or group interviews, we like people to know what sort of environment they're coming to. And the letter CSR, corporate social responsibility, whether you have any programs like that within your hotels, is what does your organisation do for the community, and what sort of community involvement do you have? And that's just some of the examples there. For example, we are what are called gold members or gold certified for EarthCheck. And this is a tourism-based body which is international, which looks at your sustainability environmental credentials, the way that you get rid of waste. For example, in the canteen I mentioned to you earlier, we have the same crockery and cutlery that the guests eat with. We got rid of all the takeaway stuff that was just literally filling up the bins and so on. We working with Oz Harvest. At last count, we'd provided over 80,000 meals for Oz Harvest. That's a group of people that just come in. For example, on a conference like we've got at the moment, it's about 1,400 people. Quite often the numbers just drop, or they just don't eat the food at lunch or at morning, afternoon tea. And if we've got food that hasn't gone anywhere near the table, that's picked up and taken off to any number of agencies like Anglicare, Vinnie's, the Hutt Street Centre and so on. So we work in with those sorts of organisations pretty well, just by way of information. Now, this is perhaps just going off slightly at a tangent, but it does impact on our interviewing processes, particularly be it group or individuals, and it's about what we call the attributes for that someone, and every other one I'm going to be putting up now can perhaps be trumped by a positive and flexible attitude. You cannot train for attitude, and so if the decision-making process is, well, that person can carry 3 plates, but they just don't come across terribly well. That person doesn't know how to carry 3 plates, but they are so energized, they are so wanting to get into the industry, then that usually helps tip the balance for you, and just about everything else will fall into place from there. Along with that positive attitude will be well-developed interpersonal skills, and that question features a lot in our interview process on the interview sheet. You know, where are your strengths? It's a great question, and give us an example how you use those strengths. And obviously interpersonal skills are the things that you develop over time, and that really works in very well in that interviewing process. You would all be aware that to work in this wonderful business you need a good level of fitness and staying power. Our statistics show us that the age range of 18 to 25 has up to 5 times the amount of sick leave taken than any other demographics at all. So the younger generation that we experience have real challenges with and that's perhaps more so for the full-timers. The casual ones we don't always see when they're off sick, because if they're casualised workforce, sometimes they're not working 5 days a week as a full-timer would work. So the statistics can be slightly skewed, but it's just the statistics. So we want people to be fit for purpose. And along with that is the resilience. As you know, you're going to have some really, really bad days in hospitality, but it's a way that you get across those days, the way that you bounce back. And that's where our psychometric testing comes in, when we test for resilience, particularly for our apprentices. Because recently we graduated, if you like, finished off 2 of our, we carry 6 cookery apprentices at any one time, and we finished our first 2 for a while. We recruited quite a lot prior to this 2 actually finishing, but for some reasons the 3 or 4 of them just decided that cookery wasn't for them. They just said, look, no, this is all too hard, and they left us, unfortunately. But we don't think that we're alone in that area as well. Obviously, the potential to successfully complete a pre-employment medical, you need to again have that raw product that you think, but again, a medical, and of course, ability to learn the basic skills. You want to have that area there. And commitment. This is a big thing in this day and age. We have, as I said, a casualised workforce, but we do try to ask them to commit to some really busy, there's 2 weekends in particular that we ask them to be available for. And it always seems to be the last weekend of November and the second weekend of December. And we say, look, we realise that you're a casual staff member, but these are the two busiest weekends. And on the, I think it's the 28th and the 29th of November this year, we've got over 7,000 people coming in over the 2 days, of the Friday and the Saturday. So we literally need all hands on deck. And we say, look, you're saying you're committed now, but we want you to honour that commitment. And as that sort of sign says, commitment means staying loyal to what you said you were going to do long after the mood you set it in has left you. No, circumstances change, we know. But again, you'd like to think that someone is going to be committed and loyal. Personal hygiene goes without saying. Honesty, as you know. And again, to the particularly youngsters, we say, look, you've only got perhaps one chance of being honest. You're working with a product that can grow legs and walks, be it alcohol or food or money. Just resist temptation, but also honesty with your customers. If you don't know something, say, oh, I'll find out for you. So honesty in your dealings with each other is very important to us. Punctuality kind of goes without saying. When we do our big functions at Christmas, we have 3,000 people that we serve dinner for. That's 160 waiters. We need 160 waiters all turning up at 5:30 on that day, because we cannot afford to give the briefing to half a dozen or even a small percentage of that turned up late. We'd have to keep on going and briefing them. So as you can appreciate, in your world, punctuality. Ability to sell, not only the products you've got, but the modern world that we seem to live in is all about branding and the identity of your product, your brand, your hotel, whatever it might be. So you've got to know all about it to sell it. Personality kind of goes with attitude, I guess. And you've got all sorts of different personalities in your world. And again, the personality that you're looking for is that person that can shine with your guests and get on well with your fellow staff members. And we look for incidences, particularly at interview, where people can give us stories of how they've supported another staff member, what we call internal customer service, which I'm sure you're familiar with that expression. Whereas if, for example, the simple story is that if you're working in the restaurant, you're a customer of the chef in the kitchen. They are providing the service of providing food for you to take to the customer. Without that relationship, nothing will go on. So you've got to have those good relationships brought about by appropriate personality. Team player goes without saying, good project knowledge, and obviously have a sense of urgency about everything that you do. Okay. Now, perhaps I've given you quite a bit as to the life or the world according to the ACC and how we go about advertising, interviewing, selecting, and then inducting staff. Whether that's equates with what you're doing or whether there's something that you might be able to take, hopefully there might be something. But do you have any questions at all, gentlemen?
Just wondering how you work around staff with like piercings and tattoos. Where do you draw the line?
Well, the policy is no, if they want to have piercings, as long as they're removed, so if it's in the tongue or in the eyebrow or some of those big spaces in the ears, as long as it's removed for their service, then for the time they're on duty, that's fine. If they've got, say, like a sleeve tattoo and their department has short sleeves, then we provide them with a long sleeve shirt and that thing. So we still say, look, there's a role for you, but there's accommodations that's made on both sides for that. If they're working in the kitchen, they obviously have to have hair nets, and so you can't have any long hair that could get caught in anything, you know, hygiene, typical standards like that. So some of the WHS helps guide us with that, but in the main, it's very much, this is the corporate environment that we're working in. This is what the clients expect from us, so we just replicate it for them for that.
How is it not, how is it not discrimination to say that they can't have piercings and tattoos?
No, we're not saying you can't have it, it's just that they can't be visible.
Right.
So that's quite okay. So you're not actually, but our policies and procedures are such, is that we just don't, we don't want to have them on display. So no, ladies who wear earrings, guys who have a single set earring, that's not an issue to us. But it is because you can then extrapolate that out to some people that come along. And again, with the colour of hair, we just say like natural hair, you know, you can colour your hair, but natural hair tones. If you come in half blue and half red, then no, sorry, then the person will be sent home. As simple as that. And as I said, I mean, tattooing and piercing has become much more mainstream, and so we obviously realise that. But whilst they're on duty, it's just an adjustment. It's not a preventative measure for someone actually starting with us at all.
It's an adjustment.
Yeah, it is. Anything else at all, gentlemen?
I'm not sure if I missed it because I wasn't listening.
That's okay.
When you said that you, when you're selecting people, you're trying to find out if they're committed or if they've got resilience.
Yes.
How exactly do you do that?
Well, as I say, some of the roles have the psychometric testing, and some of the questions that are built into that are asking about when they've actually experienced something which they've either given up on or they had to keep on attacking until they actually finished off a task. You know, how easily do you give up on a project or something like that? The actual wording of the questions, I'm not sure, but it does do that. But we also ask the questions as to perhaps why they've left a previous employer. Again, if you see in the resume that they've got some good experience, and that's sometimes a double-edged sword. If someone's got a great amount of experience from a variety of places, is that just because of a natural progression, or have they been moved on for a variety of reasons? So you need to be pretty thorough in your reading and interpreting what somebody says. And of course, in your own resumes, you'd need to identify the key tasks that you're doing and the times, at least, you know, the year and the month. Dates is okay, would be good, but you need to have that sort of information, and you need to read that in a resume so that you can find that out.
And the questions in those tests, did you guys come up with them yourselves?
No, we do it. We're working with a company called CHG Corporate Health Group, and they do both the pre-employment medicals and the psychometric testing, and they are shaped particularly for apprentice chefs, our event trainees, and just subtly different for our security, because that one in particular, a couple of applicants have answered quite strangely, and we get the obviously the report back and say this person is not recommended for this role on the basis of X, Y, and Z. And so sometimes they make interesting reading, and you know, you think security is a key role from just because it's all about dealing with people, managing large numbers of people around the building, and you can't afford to have any strange individuals. Although, having said that, I mentioned to you that I was at this place called the St. Leonard's, and it was called Lenny's Tavern. Again, ask your parents about that if you remember that. And we used to have on a Wednesday night hard rock discos there, about 500 or 600 people into their main function room. We would go through, and the old parlance was the old, what was it, the 50-gallon kegs, was it? Or what were they, 20-gallon kegs? And we used to go through about 25 of those through a night, and we used to have about 10 what were called bouncers in those days. And we didn't obviously realise it, but half of them must have been on steroids, because they were just monsters. And they were quite difficult to control, particularly if they had started drinking as well. So I think the world of security has moved on quite dramatically from that point. And yes, they still need to have a physical presence, but males or females, it's very much the talking down, and it's those interpersonal skills which are vital in any role. It's vital, certainly.
For the apprentices, you said that left before they finished.
Yes.
Did they go through the psychometric testing?
Actually, it's only in recent years, in the last 2 years, that we brought it in for the apprentices, and hopefully that means that that's given us this situation we're in now, where we're holding. One just recently left this, so we're holding 5, and another one is due to finish in October of this year, and the 4 that are remaining are progressing very well indeed. But sometimes it's just also the luck of the draw. Even though we feel we've done everything in our power to get the right people there, sometimes it's just not a right fit. And of course, any person that starts invariably has, particularly the casual roles, it's a 6-month probationary period. Make sure that they're comfortable with us and we're comfortable with them. And full-time roles invariably on a contract as well. Sometimes there might be a review after 3 months or 6 months, again, depending on the status of the role.
Just with apprentices, Tate will actually tell you when you start that half of the apprentices won't actually finish their thing. So I think in my graduating year, there was only 2 of us that finished out of the 30 that
30,
started.
wow, yeah. And it's not only that, it's the longevity of their life as a chef once they graduate as well. And so I know they're doing quite a lot to try to encourage the industry to retain the chefs, but there's still an immense turnover of personnel in that area as well. Okay. Well, thank you for your time,
Thank you very much.
ma'am and gentlemen, and hopefully there's something you can grasp and might be able to translate to your world. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.